The rain came down the way it always did in Seoul, without apology. It swept across the Han River in cold, gray sheets, blurring the skyline until the city looked like a painting left out in the storm. On the bridge above, cars moved slowly, headlights cutting pale lines through the dark. Nobody stopped. Nobody looked down at the water. Nobody except her. Han Seo-ah stood at the railing with her hands wrapped around the cold iron, her university acceptance letter folded inside the pocket of a jacket 2 seasons too thin for October. She wasn't crying. She had stopped doing that the night they told her the car was in the river and her father was not. 4 years of silence had calcified something inside her chest, not grief exactly. Something harder, something that had learned to wait. She looked at the water for a long moment. Then she picked up her bag and walked toward Hanwell University without looking back. The campus was everything the brochure promised and nothing she needed. Wide stone pathways lined with ginkgo trees shedding yellow leaves. Buildings that looked like they had been designed to remind you of your own smallness. Students in brand-name coats moving in clusters, laughter rising and falling like music from a room she hadn't been invited into. Seo-ah moved through them the way water moves around stone, steady, unbothered, invisible by choice. She already knew the layout. She had studied the campus map for weeks, cross-referencing it against the university's administrative records, the donor lists published in their annual report, the names she had quietly memorized over 4 years of piecing together what her father had been investigating before his car went into the river. Kang Group had donated this building. Kang Group had funded that research center. Kang Taeho's name was carved above the library entrance in letters wide enough to cast a shadow. She looked at it without expression and walked inside. She was reading in the corner of the library, 3rd floor, east wing, the section nobody used, when she heard them coming before she saw them. The particular silence that falls over a crowd when power enters a room, conversations dropping, postures straightening, the unconscious choreography of people who have learned that some men are weather and you simply adjust. Kang Min-jae walked through the library like he had been born doing it. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat that probably cost more than Seo-ah's monthly rent, his expression arranged into something that wasn't quite boredom and wasn't quite calm. Something she would later understand was the face a person wears when they have been performing composure for so long they've forgotten what the original felt like. 2 assistants trailed him. A 3rd held an umbrella that was no longer necessary. Students parted. He stopped. Not at a shelf, not at a desk. He stopped because Seo-ah had not looked up. Every other person in the library had found a reason to glance over, to register his arrival, to recalibrate. She was still reading, one finger tracing a line in her notebook, entirely unbothered by the shift in atmospheric pressure his presence had created. Something moved across his face, too quick to name. He kept walking. The first time they actually spoke, it wasn't polite. Professor Wu had the particular cruelty of men who have never been challenged, the kind who deliver humiliation as education and call it rigor. He had stopped in front of Seo-ah's desk during his review of submitted assignments, held her paper up by the corner the way you'd hold something you didn't want to touch, and said in front of 63 students, "Miss Han, this is a journalism program, not a community blog. Perhaps the scholarship committee was feeling generous." Laughter moved through the room like a reflex, easy, uncomplicated. Seo-ah looked up at him. "Professor Wu," she said, her voice carrying the specific kind of quiet that makes a room go still. "Is this the assignment where you deducted marks from 4 students last semester for not citing sources, while your own published research in the Hanwell Academic Review uses a 2009 government report that hasn't been publicly available since 2011? The laughter stopped. Professor Wu stared at her, his mouth opened. "Because I pulled the original document," Seo-ah continued, "or tried to. It's been removed from the National Archive, but the request logs are still accessible. 17 requests in the last 2 years, 3 of them from this department. She tilted her head slightly. I'm still working on the others. Silence. She picked up her pen and looked back down at her notebook. 30 seconds later, from 2 rows behind her, she heard a sound she didn't expect. A single quiet exhale, not quite a laugh, something more deliberate. She didn't turn around, but she knew exactly where he was sitting. He found her outside afterward, which she had expected. What she hadn't expected was that he came alone. No assistants, no entourage, just Kang Min-jae leaning against the stone pillar at the building's side entrance, hands in his coat pockets, watching her come down the steps with an expression she couldn't immediately read. You knew he wouldn't do anything, he said, not a question. I knew he couldn't, she corrected, adjusting the strap of her bag without slowing down. He fell into step beside her. She didn't invite it, she didn't stop it. That's a distinction most people don't make, he said. Most people confuse authority with power. She glanced at him sideways. You should understand that difference better than anyone. He was quiet for a moment. The wind moved through the ginkgo trees and shook loose a scatter of yellow leaves between them. What are you actually here for? He asked. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Journalism. He looked at her, the way people look at a door they suspect is locked. Right, he said. She found the archive room on her 3rd week. Sub-basement level, East Administrative Wing, accessible through a maintenance corridor that the campus map marked as storage. The lock was outdated. The university hadn't upgraded it because nobody had tried to get in for years. Seo-ah had spent 2 evenings studying the building's original construction plans, pulled from a public municipal database, and another evening practicing. Inside, it smelled of old paper and disuse, filing cabinets in rows, donor correspondence going back decades, financial agreements between the university board and Kang Group from years before Min-jae was old enough to carry the name. She pulled the 2nd drawer and began photographing. She didn't hear the door. The security camera in this corridor, said a voice behind her, has been on a 4-minute loop since someone redirected the feed at the main panel downstairs. She turned slowly. Min-jae stood in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a USB drive held loosely between 2 fingers. His expression was unreadable. The overhead light caught the edge of his jaw and made him look like a still from a film she hadn't seen yet. Her hand moved toward her bag. Don't, he said, not threatening, almost tired. I'm not going to report you. Then what are you going to do? He looked at the filing cabinet, then at her, then back at the cabinet as if doing a calculation she wasn't privy to. There are 3 security guards who rotate through this wing, he said. The next one passes this door in approximately 6 minutes. He stepped aside and held the door open. I'd suggest moving quickly. She didn't move immediately. She studied his face, the stillness of it, the absence of the performance she had already learned to recognize as his default, and found something she hadn't expected. He looked tired. Not physically, the other kind. The kind that lives behind the eyes and doesn't go away with sleep. She picked up her bag and walked past him. Why? She said quietly as she passed. He let the door fall shut behind them. I don't know yet, he said. They walked out of the corridor in opposite directions without another word, the fluorescent light flickering once above the empty room like it was trying to make up its mind. She told herself it meant nothing. The archive room, the 6-minute warning, the door held open by hands that had no reason to help her. She told herself it was strategy, that a man like Kang Min-jae did nothing without calculation, that kindness from that family was a language she needed to translate before she trusted the words. She told herself this every morning for 2 weeks. Then the journalism department announced the competition pairings, and the universe, apparently, had opinions. The notice was posted on the department board at 8 in the morning. By 8:15, Seo-ah had read it twice, put her coffee down, and stood very still in the middle of the corridor while students moved around her like a river splitting at a rock. Han Seo-ah, Kang Min-jae, investigative feature, 8 weeks. She was still standing there when he appeared beside her, reading the same board with the same expression he wore for most things, composed, unreadable, faintly like a man doing arithmetic in his head. "I didn't arrange this," he said. "I know," she said. A pause. "You know. You're not the type to be obvious." She picked up her coffee. "If you arranged it, we wouldn't be paired. We just keep ending up in the same places until I couldn't prove it wasn't coincidence." He looked at her for a moment with something that might have been the beginning of a smile, if it had been given another half-second to arrive. "We should set rules," he said. "Already have." She started walking. "No personal questions, no pretending this is something it is. We work, we submit, we go back to our lives." He fell into step beside her, that easy, unhurried stride that suggested he had never once in his life needed to rush toward anything. "And if I break the rules?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "Then I will too," she said, "and neither of us wants that." The first 3 weeks were professional, efficient, almost cold. They met in the library at 7 each evening, laptops open, notes divided, conversation restricted to the work. He was precise in a way she hadn't anticipated, not the careless brilliance of someone who had been handed everything, but something more disciplined, almost severe, like a person who had decided early that excellence was the only armor worth wearing. She noticed things she hadn't meant to. The way he held his pen with more pressure than necessary, as if anchoring himself to the page. The way he went still when his phone buzzed with certain numbers, not reaching for it, not ignoring it, just waiting for it to stop, his jaw set. The way he sometimes looked out the library window at the city below them like he was trying to remember why it mattered. She stopped noticing by reminding herself why she was there. It worked mostly. The night she saw his father, she hadn't meant to see anything at all. She had arrived early to return a book, taken a wrong corridor in the sprawling Min-jae estate, and found herself at the edge of a dining room doorway before she understood where she was. The room was enormous and cold in the way that rooms are cold when warmth has never been the point. A chandelier hung above a table long enough to seat 20. 2 place settings had been arranged at one end, precise as surgery. Chairman Kang Tae-ho sat at the head. Min-jae sat 1 seat away, back straight, hands in his lap, his face arranged into the expression Seo-ah now recognized as his armor, composed, unreadable, present without being available. His father was speaking. "The Tokyo meeting is Thursday. You'll attend in my place." Not a request, the tone of a man who had never needed to phrase things as questions. "The board needs to see you handling pressure without me standing behind you." "I understand," Min-jae said. "Do you?" His father set down his chopsticks. "Because understanding and performing are 2 different things, and what I need from you Thursday is a performance." Min-jae was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll perform," he said. Something crossed Chairman Kang's face. It wasn't disappointment exactly. It was more clinical than that, like a craftsman examining work that was technically correct but somehow insufficient. "You're not my son tonight," he said. "You're my successor. There's a difference. Learn to carry both." Min-jae said nothing. He picked up his chopsticks. He ate. Seo-ah stepped back from the doorway before she was seen, her shoulder pressing against the cold wall of the corridor, the grandfather clock at the end of the hall marking the silence with its slow, indifferent pulse. She stood there for a moment, longer than she needed to. Then she walked back the way she came. She didn't mention it. Neither did he, but something shifted in the careful architecture of their arrangement. Some wall thinned without either of them deciding to thin it. It started with small things. He began bringing 2 coffees without being asked, remembering exactly how she took hers. She started sending him research notes before he asked for them, footnoted in the margins with observations that had nothing to do with the assignment. One evening, it rained so hard the library windows went opaque with it, and neither of them suggested leaving, and at some point between 11 and midnight the laptops closed and they were just talking. Not about the project. About everything else. My father wanted me to be a doctor, she said, watching the rain. He used to say journalists live at the edge of other people's stories and never get to have their own. Was he wrong? She considered the question seriously, which he had come to understand was something she always did. Gave things their actual weight instead of the weight that was convenient. He changed his mind, she said quietly. Toward the end, he changed his mind about a lot of things. Min-jae looked at her. She was still watching the rain, her reflection faint in the dark glass, and something about her expression in that moment, not sad exactly, but old in a way that had nothing to do with age, made him set down his coffee and say nothing, because he understood instinctively that some silences are not empty. What about you? She said, turning to look at him. What did you want to be, before the answer became obvious? He smiled. The real one. The one that arrived without being managed and lasted about 3 seconds before he remembered to put it away. A pilot, he said. She stared at him. What? I was 8. I'd never been on a plane, I thought. He stopped, looked at the rain. I thought if you were high enough up, none of it could reach you. She looked at him for a long moment. Did it work, she asked, when you finally flew? The first time they put me on a private jet to Shanghai, my father spent the entire flight on calls. He picked up his coffee, so I never actually found out. The rain pressed against the glass. The library was quiet around them, the kind of quiet that only exists after midnight in places meant for other hours. She was looking at him differently now. She knew it and couldn't stop it, the subtle recalibration happening somewhere behind her sternum, the way her understanding of him was rewriting itself in real time, filling in spaces she had deliberately left blank. Which was exactly when she remembered. The folder on her laptop, the photographs from the archive, the name carved in stone above the library door, the river, the car, the body they never recovered. She looked down at the table. I should go, she said. Seo-ah. Early morning. She was already closing her notebook, movements efficient, deliberate, the armor going back on in pieces. The draft is good. We can finish the footnotes Thursday. He watched her pack without moving, his coffee held in both hands, something careful and restrained in his expression. A question he had decided not to ask yet, set aside for a moment he wasn't sure would come. She pulled on her jacket, paused at the door. Didn't turn around. Good night, Min-jae. Good night, he said. She walked out into the rain without an umbrella, and he sat in the empty library with 2 cold coffees, and the particular silence of a person who has just understood something they weren't ready to understand. Outside, Seo-ah stopped on the stone steps, rain soaking through her jacket, and pressed her eyes shut. Don't, she told herself. The city answered with thunder, low and rolling, moving across the Han River from somewhere she couldn't see. She walked home anyway.